Northern Power Women podcast. For your career and your life, no matter what business you're in.
Well, hello, I'm Sam Walker and welcome to another episode 4 of the Northern Power Women podcast. Don't make me bake apple crumble. Coming up, find out from Karen Mattison, joint CEO of Timewise, what it is that women and men want, what they really, really want.
The men come, they want it just as much as the women. And interestingly, younger men want it, and it's absolutely fundamental to them.
In Ask The Hive this month, a place where you ask the question and the Northern Power Women Network provides a host of advice, we talk about why it appears that many successful women suffer from a chronic lack of confidence.
So you're telling me that I can do food technology and I can make an apple pie, I can make apple crumble, but I can't go in and learn to code.
In our discussion group, our contributors share their experiences over 3 lively subjects.
I was the only man in the room, so they come to me and they say, where are we putting the concrete? And I just sort of turned around and said, I don't know, why don't you ask our MD, Kirsten? She's also the one that can weld.
But first, as ever, let's kick off proceedings with a word from the founder of Northern Power Women, the one and only Simone Roche, with some news from HQ.
A jam-packed update this month. I'm not quite sure where to start. But firstly, thank you to Becky at Constellations for hosting this month's podcast live with Liam Kelly from Late Liverpool and Maggie O'Carroll from the Women's Organisation. We've launched a brand new website, you might have noticed. Thank you to our Newcastle ambassador Adele Mitchinson for creating a new platform focused on our brilliant Northern role models. Please do take a look. We've also created a new blog section too, so if you'd like to contribute or get involved, please contact us via the website. As well as a new website, we've also opened nominations for the 3rd Northern Power Women Awards. 10 categories, including a new one for innovation. Plus, we need your nominations to add to the Power and Future lists. Do help us celebrate success. The weekly Northern Power Hour every Thursday on Twitter at midday is proving really popular, and this month we're focused on who and what inspires you, and it might just give you some ideas for who to nominate to. A big thanks for your input in our returners work. Your feedback is going to good use, so please watch out for our returners event with Vodafone in November. Finally, you may not be aware, but Northern Power Women evolved from the International Festival for Business in 2014, showcasing the UK as a great place to trade and invest. I created an event called Women Inspiring the Economy at the festival, and Northern Power Women was born as a legacy of that event. This month, at the launch for the 2018 event, I got 90 seconds to talk Northern Power Women with its patron, Prince William, the Duke of Cambridge, and it was reassuring to hear of his passion and support for women in business and female entrepreneurs. Now, don't forget to subscribe to the podcast and leave your review, and hopefully we'll now get one by royal appointment. Thank you. See you next month.
Never likely to rub shoulders again with commoners like you and I. Thank you to Simone. And of course, you can follow everything that Northern Power Women does online at the new shiny northernpowerwomen.com and also on Twitter at North Power Women. Now, to this month's discussion panel. Thank you so much to everyone who came along to be part of the audience, and do check out Twitter for details how you could be there next month. And thank you so much to Constellations in Liverpool, who this month were our marvellous hosts. That's an impressive amount of clapping. I love that. Hello, thank you so much for being here today, and welcome to the recording of episode 4. I know how we've grown already of the Northern Power Women podcast. I'm Sam Walker. Hello. Thank you so much for listening. As ever, we have got 3 fantastic people to be part of our panel today. So without further ado, let me lunge over first of all to Maggie O'Carroll, the CEO of the Women's Organisation. Also with us today, Liam Kelly, Director of Make Liverpool and Chair of the Baltic Triangle, and Becky Wild, Managing Director of the beautiful and awesome event space we're in today, Constellations. Thank you all. So lots of questions have been coming in, and let me start off with one that's quite pertinent to the news this week, actually. We learned this week that a quarter of young teenagers are showing signs of depression. Do employers still need to gain a better understanding of how mental health affects their workforce? And how important is this? Maggie, let me start with you.
I think it's absolutely crucial insofar as this is the future. The work pipeline, or the talent pipeline, is crucial to the economy. But the issue of mental health is something that's been misunderstood, stigmatised, and also particularly child and adolescent mental health is something that also has been under-resourced and under-invested in. And effectively, employers really do need to get to grips with supporting people and supporting particularly young people, apprentices, into employment, and so consequently, and to be maintained within employment as well, because the world's changed. We're a very fast-moving economy. There's a gig economy. There's the whole issue of social media, and actually what impact is that having on employees' mental health. But effectively, absolutely, there needs to be more investment. There needs to be more services, and there needs to be a connection between health services and employers. I think there's a bit of a disconnect at the moment.
Liam, let me come to you. Liam Kelly, Director of Make Liverpool and Chair of the Baltic Triangle. What are your thoughts on this?
As an employer and also somebody who suffered from ill mental health when I was younger, I'd like to think that my employees would feel comfortable enough to have that conversation with me, or at least tell me that they have something that they don't feel comfortable talking to me about. And I think that if I just talk quickly about my experience with it, and I was a remote worker, which meant that my head office was in London and I worked up here. This is actually what led to us starting Make Liverpool as a co-working space originally. We needed something for ourselves, and I had cabin fever, and I can cast my mind back to how difficult it was to have that conversation with my boss, because my role required me to drive around the country and to do things that like an anxiety situation would make difficult. And I always sort of considered myself as somebody who could talk openly about things, because that's how I was lucky enough to be raised. But then when it came to something like this, it was surprisingly hard. And I think if I'd had a less understanding boss or a more formal work life, I may have ended up losing my job in the way that I acted or reacted. And I was just very lucky to have an understanding employer. And I think that also as employers, our hands are tied a little as well. Legislation doesn't give parity to mental health as it does with physical health. It's very clear what the actions are to take when somebody has a broken leg. I think that we need to get to that situation where those things are treated the same or looked at the same in society and in the workplace as well. And that's where we should be aiming to get to. Yeah, it's a difficult thing, and sometimes people don't want to talk about it, and that's perfectly reasonable. We should hopefully trust in our employees that if there's a reason why they don't want to talk to you about something, that they're not screwing you over with the amount of time that they're taking off or need to take off. And also like how quickly we get healed. So if we're talking at it in a context of health, and I, for example, break my leg, there's a very clear route to me getting back to work. There's a very clear route to me getting fixed. And there's also, there's a difference between me spraining my leg and me breaking my leg. And there's varying degrees of seriousness, and appropriate action is taken for those things. And also the amount of time you're expected to heal and need is differing. But we don't understand mental health enough publicly to even make those sorts of judgments. It's like you either have poor mental health or you don't have poor mental health, and that is in itself a ridiculous situation to be in.
Becky, I mean, from what Maggie and Liam have said, there still seems to be this lack of understanding about what mental health is, and that translates, I suppose, the bottom line is there's a fear around it.
Indeed. I mean, I think I've been really fortunate in all of my employment history and my experiences of being an employer that I've always had really positive interactions about poor mental health, either as myself or as an employer of people who were experiencing difficulties at the time. My business as it stands is probably a mecca for mental instability. I think it's what makes my company beautiful. We're an extremely supportive and open group of people around mental health, and I think not that was necessarily what I set out to create as a business. It's actually one of the things that I'm most proud of. So we've been really fortunate to access some amazing support through other organisations such as the Women's Organisation, and there is great free education, like workshops and things that I think employers can access. I think finding information about those things is difficult. As a small business, paying for training is quite a difficult thing to do. But there's actually a huge amount of free resources that I think employers and employees can gain through that.
Okay, let's get to question number 2. And again, this is something that's been in the news, and I know I've been discussing with lots of different colleagues who are sending their kids off to university. This is the time of year, of course, when lots of kids are going off to start a whole new world. University fees are set to rise again for a lot of students. How important is higher education within the business world? The bottom line is, do we need a degree, or do future business people, men and women, need a degree to be taken seriously? Liam, your thoughts on this first of all?
So let's talk about the fact that I don't have a degree, and I don't have any A-levels, and I have terrible GCSEs, but I still went to university, and I studied a subject that didn't need to be a degree. So yes, I have very strong opinions about whether or not we need to have all of these degrees that we have, but also understand at the same time we do need a standardized method of vetting our experiences in education, and currently that's done through expanding the university offer. That's problematic probably for the future, and I've got sort of nothing to quote to back that up other than my opinion. And do businesses need people with degrees? Absolutely. We need doctors and engineers and all of those things. And actually, it seems that universities are increasingly more receptive to encouraging more women to become empowered with education and knowledge. They are outstripping men when it comes to higher level and educational achievement. That can be an avenue that would help sort of with some of that balance that we need in the workplace. But fundamentally, as a small business, it's difficult to employ somebody who doesn't have experience, and it is difficult to find a job when you don't have experience. And we have this ridiculous trap that people are in. And I've been, before this role as a director of a small company, I was working for a small company, and we were faced with exactly that same problem. The cost involved with upskilling staff. We offered a part-time job, and the girl who came for the role was more than qualified on paper, but she just didn't interview as well as we hoped, and that was our only opportunity to see what she was like. That's a failing of our interview process as novices, but we couldn't take the risk. It was too financially risky to, okay, what if we take on this person and we owe this person the dues of their wages and all that sort of stuff, and if she'd have been able to prove to us that her experience would have allowed us to have that confidence, then it would have been a different story. And perhaps what we should have been asking for is not graduates, but people with experience. But then we have that trap. I don't have a solution to that, but I think that we need to acknowledge that that's a serious problem.
Becky, what about your experience? You run a business. Have you got a degree?
I do. I was a mature student, so I went to university when I was about 27 years old. I wanted to progress into a management role within the sector that I was working in at the time. Perfectly timed my graduation to the recession, and found the third sector that I'd just worked in for 10 years didn't exist anymore, and became an intern at the age of 30. That was interesting. Had to move back home, live with my mum and my 11-year-old daughter, back working for free again. Very interesting scenario around the table. And then actually, kind of restarted through work experience, came into a new career, ended up owning a business. So, it was an interesting journey for me. I don't think I would knock that experience. I don't like the debt, but I gained a lot from that. I wouldn't say necessarily they were like the obvious transferable skills, but, it was a wonderful experience. I'm now in the fortunate position that my daughter wants to go to university, and is faced with the same problem, that she wants to go and study for 5 years to go and get into a career as a counsellor. And my wholehearted belief is that she should go and get a job and that she should work her way through that. But how do I deny her the experience of being a student? But I'm paying for it. So it's like, how am I going to put that much money into something when I just wholeheartedly don't believe that that is what is going to gain her the job that she wants at the end of that?
Is she nervous about debt? Because a lot of people call it a graduate tax and say, well, look, you're not paying it back until you earn a certain amount. And you shouldn't think of it as a £30,000 debt or whatever that you have.
I think she's very aware of it as a debt. She sees it against herself. She understands it is for her. She's worked since she was the age of 13, so she earns her money, she spends her money. She knows how many hours she has to work to buy that pair of jeans. So I think she's aware that it will affect her future employment choices because she feels that is a debt that she will have to repay. As an employer, I have to say that we don't actively look at educational qualifications whatsoever. If I'm honest, through a shortlisting process, we're probably looking at how someone presents themselves in a cover letter and what their CV looks like, as much as we're looking for that educational background. And I guess, as Liam mentioned, we're novices in terms of recruitment. We've made these processes up to suit our environment, but I often find that the practices that are taught in educational environments are outdated to the practices that you actually need within the employment world. So it's actually almost like a detraction to us.
Really interesting. And Maggie, we often hear people like Lord Sugar on TV saying, I didn't go to do any higher or further education. You don't need it. If you've got a business mind, you power through. Is he the exception, or could people like he become the rule? Is a degree necessary to be taken seriously?
Well, I think that's exactly the problem. The evidence base is very clear in relation to this, that in actual fact businesses are run, and most successful businesses are run with people with degrees and postgraduate degrees. So Lord Sugar is the exception, and so is Richard Branson and whoever else. And you could probably name two. They're probably the only two I can name. I do know a number of people that haven't got any formal education, but education is the silver bullet, and it doesn't necessarily have to be a degree. I do think that the discussion around different types of learning and knowledge acquisition is something that we're not really having within the education framework in this country. So consequently, those ideas of technical skills that can certainly drive the economy and drive entrepreneurship. I'm terribly saddened by this, how the debate can be sort of really polarised into saying we don't really throw education into the waste paper basket, and we really don't need it in order to be an entrepreneurial society. Personally, I have found education as the silver bullet. It has enabled social mobility. It has, I've seen it in terms of an employer base, as an employer, that we, across the board, we hire people with degrees, without degrees, further education, NVQs, all sorts of qualifications, and some people that we just take right from the beginning, after school, where they haven't had a good time in secondary school, haven't really enjoyed it, and then they go on a learning path. So there's a variety of routes. But this notion of theoretical learning and practice and knowledge acquisition is something that I think is absolutely crucial within society. It's crucial for the economy, it's crucial for social mobility. I'm of an age where it was a full grant for me. So I'm hugely grateful for that. But fundamentally, I would probably suggest to you that if I didn't have that opportunity, and at my postgraduate level I had a scholarship, I'm not sure I would have done any of those things. And I don't think I would have been as effective as I am on a day-to-day basis, whatever that is, without those that acquisition of knowledge and skills and learning.
Thank you, Maggie. Just as a kind of show of hands, who here in the audience has got a degree? All bar one, in fact. And Simone, did you ever feel, person who doesn't have a degree, you can just nod or shake your head, that not having a degree held you back?
Doesn't seem to be holding me back.
Doesn't seem to be holding her back. I can tell by looking at it, it's not holding her back at all. But really interesting. Well, look, always really brilliant to hear your thoughts, of course, your comments, anything you'd like to say. Do tweet us at North Power Women, or you can email podcasts at northernpowerwomen.com. Right, final question. This is something I had a debate about on the wireless, in fact, the other day. Now, just a few weeks ago, a Silicon Valley CEO revealed she dyed her blonde hair brown and wore, in her words, more gender-neutral clothes in order to, and again her words, to be taken more seriously. The specific example here was that she was looking to speak to venture capitalists, and she said, if I'm going into a company and asking venture capitalists to give me hundreds of thousands, if not millions of dollars, I need to look, in her words, gender neutral, and she felt that having blonde hair might have been a distraction. Becky Wilde, discuss.
I know we had a little round the office kind of chat about this today. I personally dress in all kinds of different styles for all kinds of different things, but I'm not going to deny that I will dress to get the outcome that I want out of an exchange, or that I will dress to kind of create a relationship with the people that I'm about to speak to. So I don't know necessarily if that is a disservice or a gender-related thing, or just savvy business sense.
Liam, your thoughts?
I own a really nice pair of red shoes that I will wear to meetings that are important. And people know when I come back in the office and I've got these shoes on, they're my serious shoes. And everyone knows that I've been to a serious meeting. But I tend to dress down, and recently was challenged trying to get into JMU to a meeting at the engineering department because I was dressed not too dissimilar to how I'm dressed now. And I was trying to get into the car park, and the guy leant out the window and said, "This isn't student parking." And I said, "It's fine, you know, I'm here for a meeting with the head of engineering, no big deal." But in relation to that actual point that was raised, this happens a lot. People are judged on the way that they look, and it is undoubtedly true that women are judged. It's in the news at the moment that a Canadian MP, Jerry Ritz, he called one of the Liberal MPs in Canada a climate Barbie because she's got blonde hair and she was talking about climate change. And I think that that's inherent, like that. If that's your go-to when you want to insult somebody, then you know that your undertones are the patriarchy, and that status quo is the issue that is being raised in this question.
Would you feel offended? Because some of the men I spoke to about this said, wait a minute, the suggestion is that if she's dressing in a non-feminine way and dyeing her blonde hair brown, she's suggesting that as a man, I'd be too distracted by her beauty in order to make good business decisions. Do you find that offensive? What's your response?
I'll respond by telling you that people actively try and avoid our managing director at Make Liverpool, who is a woman, and far more organised than I am, and considerably better at the job of being MD than I am. But people try and cut her out of the conversation when they want to get an answer, and they come to me for some reason. There are other directors, and they're all women, and it seems to be me who gets the second choice of trying to get the answer. And another sort of anecdote of this was, you know, I was in the office, and we had some building contractors come in, and they wanted to know where to, I don't know, put the concrete or something like that. And I'm there doing my work, and they come in, they open the door and they go, "Hey," and they didn't even ask who it was that they needed to ask. I was the only man in the room, so they come to me and they say, "Where are we putting the concrete?" And I just sort of turned around and said, "I don't know, why don't you ask our MD, Kirsten? She's also the one that can weld." And when it comes to those sorts of things, like it's that to me was the undertone of this question. That is a repeated thing over and over again. So it doesn't surprise me that. And also, I've got another statistic here that I'm going to read out. Fiona Shaw wrote something for the Business Tribune, and it says that 9% of startup investment went to businesses with women as the founder. Just 9% in the last few years. So it doesn't surprise me that if she wants nothing to get in her way, then she'll swallow her pride and dye her hair brown so that she's taken a little bit more seriously. It's a sad state of affairs, but it's true.
Do you think she was swallowing her pride, Maggie, or do you think she was being very clever? How do you feel about her decision?
I wouldn't call it clever. I wouldn't. I think I would take the view that any person, woman or man, that's going into venture capital and they're looking for, that's going to be a partnership going forward. They're looking for investment. And that relationship has to be one of mutual respect and also a collaborative activity to make it really and truly successful. So I'm getting my advisor head on here, and I would say, don't do that. Because anybody is going to, if you're not going to get the response you need to get on the basis of what you're saying and how you're presenting it, it doesn't make any difference if you wear, a leprechaun's outfit. It's immaterial, really.
Is it really? Would you wear a leprechaun's outfit to a business meeting?
If it was St. Patrick's Day, I might. If I was looking to get noticed. I personally don't buy that whole thing around how you look. I think it's what you're saying. I think it's how you're saying it. Don't get me wrong, the evidence base isn't great in terms of venture capital, particularly in the United States. But the idea of, dyeing, I'd look like Morticia if I dyed my hair black. There's a serious thing. I think what happens is that this kind of story gets picked up in the press because it's kind of out there. It's kind of a little bit on the ridiculous. Because if she was just saying, I'm having difficulty trying to raise finance on the basis of the fact that I'm going in to a very male-dominated area of investment, my advice to her is that, there are plenty of venture capital circles, as they call them, that actually focus on female enterprises, and that there are women lending to women. So, think of something different. Don't start changing who you are in order to pander to a bunch of misogynists, if that's the case, would be my advice.
What fantastic advice to end on. Huge round of applause. Thank you so much for coming along today. And thank you as well to our fantastic panel, to Maggie O'Carroll, Liam Kelly, and also to Becky Wild. Thank you so much. Thanks again to our brilliant panellists. And if one of your colleagues turns up to work tomorrow dressed as a leprechaun, you know who to blame. If you'd like to take part in the future, or you've got a suggestion for a discussion, please do get in touch. Just email us, podcast@northernpowerwomen.com. Now it is time to delve into the mind of an individual who lives with real purpose and hear about some of the decisions and challenges that they have faced in their career. Today you're going to hear from a member of the Northern Power Women Power List, Liverpool's Karen Mattison. She's the joint CEO of Timewise, an organisation which works towards creating, in their words, a better, fairer job market for people who want to work flexibly. I spoke to Karen in her home office from the Northern Power Women studio.
We run a job site for candidates who want flexible and part-time work. We help businesses make flexible working work for them. And finally, we run campaigns for a better, fairer job market.
And I'm presuming this idea and this whole movement was born out of personal experience.
Yeah, it was. It was a very similar experience that I had, and also my co-CEO, Emma, who I'd worked with already. And about 12 years ago, my experience was that I just got completely stuck in the world of work, in the job market, because I wanted to work. I was in work at the time. I had 2 young kids, and I was ready to progress to my next kind of role. I still felt ambitious, but I wanted the flexibility that I had in the job. I was in a management job at the time, and I had a flexible arrangement. I could work 4 days a week, and I wanted to find something that was flexible in the next role, but I sort of wanted to step up. And I looked around for 6 months, and I literally couldn't find anything to apply for. And I found myself completely stuck, like paralysed in the job market, really, because I felt like I was stuck where I was because I couldn't move up where I was and I couldn't move out. And I guess my experience at the time was I thought that the problem was with me, and I thought that I didn't fit into the world of work anymore because what I wanted, I kept being told wasn't possible, which was a challenging, progressed role, but less than full-time, and I was told that wasn't possible, so I assumed that I needed to think again about whether I fit into the world of work. And what then happened was the more I spoke to other women, I found myself at the school gates more, and the more I spoke to other women, I realised this was a huge experience. And this was, my son is 19, my oldest son is 19 now, so he was about 5 at the time. So this is, 14, 15 years ago. No one was talking like they talk now about things like women returners and women in the workplace and part-time work. It really just literally wasn't being talked about. And what I realised was there were so many people who were having a similar experience, who'd fallen out of work, not because they wanted to, because they just couldn't find that flexibility.
And how did you sell that in, for want of a better phrase, to companies who you did feel had the doors closed to you? Once you set Timewise up, people who would say, well, wait a minute, I don't want 2 or 3 people doing this role. I want one person, so I've got that one point of contact. How did you sell in this concept to a very sort of blinkered society, I suppose, business society?
Well, it's interesting because at the beginning we weren't operating the model that we've really changed a lot, and we weren't operating the model that we're operating now. So we were very much focused on coaching and supporting women to help them back into work, which continues to be a really important area of work. But what we were doing was sort of selling them in, I guess, to businesses that had already got their heads around part-time flexible work. So traditionally, like small, medium-sized businesses, charities with limited budgets. So where they could see, well, I might want a finance director, but I can't afford them 5 days a week. I don't even need them 5 days a week. And it's a bit of a myth. It's interesting because when people talk about part-time work, how difficult it is for small businesses, actually, I think they've always used part-time flexible workers because it actually makes business sense to them. And the bigger challenge has been selling into the larger corporate businesses for whom it's not a budget challenge. But at the beginning, we were really focused on supporting the women into what is effectively a pretty rubbish job market. And I think where we've changed is we've also realised that you can't just focus on fixing the women to fit into a bad market. You have to address the market failures that there exist. So lots of the work that we do now is really helping businesses see the actual benefits to them of employing a part-time flexible workforce, how jobs can be designed, how you can find innovation there, because of course they're scratching their heads and wondering, how do we deal with all these challenges? Why do all these women come to us at graduate level, perform really well and then disappear? What can we do about it? And the answer is you need to change too, because the world of work has changed so dramatically, and the workforce that you want has changed dramatically in terms of what they want. And so we do lots and lots of work now on helping businesses really innovate in how they design jobs, because it's a very blinkered view, as you say, to think about work having to fit into this Monday to Friday 9 to 5, sit on your chair. It just isn't like that anymore.
What are the main benefits? If business owners or people at senior levels within corporations are listening thinking, yeah, for me, it's not going to be right. What advantages would flexible workers bring to my business? What would you say?
It's actually not that difficult for businesses to be pointed out to the benefits of flexible working. And I think the fact that the whole conversation has been about women and children probably hasn't done the flexible working conversation or women that many favours, because there are huge benefits to businesses of employing a flexible workforce. There's a real estate. If you don't need to pay for a huge amount of office space in central London or central Manchester, don't do it. If your workforce has got the technology to work remotely or is out on the road seeing clients or whatever it might be, you don't need to have a desk for them sitting there. Then if you start to quantify the costs of retraining and rehiring, the recruitment and retention piece is so huge as soon as you start to quantify it. And we know we don't need any more surveys to tell us that this is a fundamental in terms of why people leave businesses, that they can't find the flexibility that they need. And I think that the other thing is that this is now no longer a conversation about a sort of subgroup of women with children in the workforce. And actually at Timewise we did a big piece of research that we launched last week, which showed that if you put together those who work flexibly and those who want to, you're looking at almost 90% of the actual workforce at the moment. And so in many ways, flexibility is as important as salary to people. That might be because they have caring responsibilities. It might be because they're studying. It might be for health reasons. There are any number of reasons at any time in your life where that comes into effect. And I think businesses are starting to understand it's something they need a strategy on rather than need a policy on.
It's really interesting you've brought up the notion that this whole conversation of flexible working, if you centre it solely on women, it actually does a disservice to everyone. And do you work uniquely with women? Because more and more we're hearing male voices going, wait a minute, I want to pick my kids up from school. Wait a minute, I'd like an extra holiday to spend with my family.
I think I came into this and I became passionate about it very much from a women's point of view. But the more I've looked at it, the more that we've, and actually the original brand that we launched under was a very women-focused brand. But when we launched Timewise, it was because of that very understanding that we have to get this right for all groups, both genders, all groups of society. And interestingly, on our own job site, the biggest growing number of candidates, so we've got 90,000 candidates on our job site looking for flexible and part-time jobs, and the biggest growth really is in the men, because the minute you make it acceptable to talk about flexibility for both for men and women, the men come, they want it just as much as the women. And interestingly, younger men want it, and people are making decisions about their work, and it's absolutely fundamental to them. And I think the other problem is that the real negative brands that we've got around part-time, like it's a little part-time job for a mum. And you immediately think of something kind of low-skilled, entry-level, and actually that hasn't done anybody any favours either. So if you take the wider definition of flexibility, which is on when, where, and how much people work. So the how much bit is the part-time. The when is obviously, when you work. What might work for you in your personal setup is some sort of compressed hours. And the where, obviously, is being able to work from different locations. These are hugely important to people. So even if you are, say you're a young person for whom owning a flat, for example, you really want to be on the property ladder, but owning a flat in a city centre is just unaffordable. You might be able to commute, for example, for a good hour away. That's fine. 3 days a week if you can work from home 2 days. That flexibility is hugely important to you, just as it is for the mum who's got a 3-day week for childcare reasons. And then when it comes to moving jobs, it can also be a trap, because you want to take the flexibility with you when you move in your role. And that's where the job market becomes blocked in exactly the same way as it became blocked for me. Because when employers advertise jobs at the moment, less than 10% of them even mention what flexibility there may or may not be in a role that they advertise. They always talk about salary, but they never mention, well, only 1 in 10 of them do, flexible working as a possibility. And that creates a huge challenge in the job market for people who want or need to work flexibly or part-time.
A lot of the women that I speak to who do work part-time, and I mention women specifically because actually I don't know many men who work part-time at the moment, but many of the women I speak to who work part-time said it's very easy to fall into the trap of officially, in inverted commas, working 4 days a week or 3 days a week, and officially being paid and getting the pension benefits and the holiday benefits of working 3 or 4 days a week. But in reality, they say they're pretty much working full time. Yeah. And actually, our very first Northern Power Women podcast, one of the panellists said exactly that. She totted her hours up on 4 days a week and worked as many as her 5-day-a-week male colleagues. How do you not fall into that trap?
It's a really interesting question, and I'd say in our consultancy side of the business, it's one of the biggest areas of growth, which is what I would call flexible and part-time job design. Because what happens traditionally in that situation that you describe is that somebody may be in a full-time job, and then they want to stay in that job, but they suddenly need to work less. So the person that they ask for that flexible or part-time arrangement, for example, the 4 days is the classic one. Can I work 4 days? They want to keep them, and that person wants to stay in the job. So everybody agrees, and everybody's very pleased and sort of congratulates each other. Isn't this fantastic? I'm working 4 days a week. But nothing gets redesigned about how the job is done. So effectively, you haven't had an honest conversation. Right, well, where's the 20% of that job going to go? Can it be done through admin? Can it be given to somebody else? There's 20% here that's got to go somewhere. So after that honeymoon of gratitude, what people can find is they're actually squeezing their full-time job into one which is actually in 80% of the time, and that's a really difficult experience for everybody. Whereas if we were having much more honest and open conversations about the design of the job, what's in, what's out, less focused about hours and more about output, what are the priorities here, then you have a really interesting conversation, because actually you can cut it any which way at all, and you can take much more of a team approach to it. So it's not a special thing that we do for a mum after maternity leave. This is just how we do business, because we're a company that understands how to judge outputs rather than the input.
And how, on a similar line really, how do you switch off? Because we've all done a working from home day, and it's easier to leave the office at 5 o'clock or 6 o'clock or 3 o'clock or whenever your working hour is. But quite often when you're at home, maybe you go and pick your children up and you give them their tea, or you finish your working day, and then it's very easy to slip back in, isn't it? To just going, I'm just going to finish off those emails because I'm in working mode and I'm still at home. How do you draw that line?
Look, I think any kind of work these days, work has kind of bled into our lives in a way that we all thought it was so fantastic that we didn't have to wait at the office for that phone call. We could get it now on our mobile. So that was marvellous because we could leave the office early and know that the phone would come in. So while technology liberated us from sitting at an office, it also took our work home with us. And I think that's true whether you're working from home or you've got a kind of more of a traditional office job. I think it's incumbent on both businesses and individuals to set some sort of boundaries around it. It's an interesting thing, this whole working from home debate, because the assumption is that you're doing less. And I really find very funny the whole thing about, well, people might just put a wash on when they're working from home. I would always put a wash on when I work from home. That takes me 30 seconds. I think that's absolutely fine. There's all sorts of things that I actually personally find on the one day a week I work from home, I'm incredibly focused. I get a huge amount done. And I keep for that working at home day the things that I find it hard to do in the office, like think and write and when I'm not doing meetings. But I think that it is incumbent on you anyway in what we would call these kind of extreme jobs to create for yourself boundaries around it. So log off and then that's it. But that's true whether you're office-based or home-based, I think. Can we just go back to something we were just talking about earlier about the whole women and part-time thing?
Yeah.
When I talked about how I felt when I was looking for a job and I thought I just don't fit in, what I really wanted was to know that there were role models out there. I just thought, who's me in 10 years' time? Who's actually managed to do this? And because I couldn't see anybody visibly working in any kind of senior role on a part-time basis, I just thought that no one had really cracked it. And, certainly in the organisation I was in, there was one other person who had children, and she'd never worked part-time, and I literally didn't know anyone in my own network. I think that was part of the assumption of why it wasn't possible. But then when we set up the organisation, Timewise, and the work that we were doing, I had a really good look at the government's data. What I found was there were 800,000 people working part-time in the UK right now in the higher tax bracket. So there's 8 million people working part-time overall, and 800,000 of them are working in the higher tax bracket. So there are a huge numbers of people, and 20% of them are men. So there are huge numbers of people who are working in those senior levels part-time, but they're just not really talking about it, or they didn't seem to have very much of a voice. And what we did was we interviewed 300 of them and asked them how they felt about it. And what they said was, yeah, it's working for me, but I don't really want to have the brand of the part-time worker because it won't do me any favours. I'll be seen as on the mummy track, passed over for interesting projects. Or some of them said, my manager said, I'll give it to you, but I don't want all those poor performers doing it, so kind of do it under the radar. And then you hear these terrible things about people walking out of the office through the fire escape, so people don't know they've left early and things like that. And so what we really wanted to do was tell the stories of people who are actually making it work. Because for me, as a candidate 13 years ago, I would have found that so inspiring, and it would have given me hope that it was possible, or courage to ask. And so we launched a power list of people who work part-time and flexibly in 2012. And I was always really clear that we were looking for men as well as women to tell the stories of the kind of people who are working in those senior part-time flexible roles. And it's been probably one of the most rewarding parts of the job because meeting and finding those people that I thought didn't exist, and every year we add another 50. So we've just opened nominations now for this year's Timewise Power List, and we've extended the search. So for people in senior roles who are doing job shares, who've returned from work from a career break, or simply doing senior jobs on a part-time basis, we're really looking to tell another 50 stories because there's been some absolutely amazing ones in the past. And I know there are so many people, interestingly, I heard someone on your previous podcast saying how she'd found that very inspiring herself about what was possible. And so really I'd love anybody who is listening, if you've got anyone to nominate, please do so on timewise.co.uk.
Karen, we often find ourselves stuck in our careers and we don't know which way to turn and we don't fit into the existing frameworks. You took that challenge and actually created your own framework, which is incredibly empowering and inspiring for so many people, men and women. If people find themselves in the situation that you were in, it can be frightening to think, well, do you know what, I'm going to go and set up my own business. But you've shown it's completely possible and people are still doing that.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I didn't imagine that I would end up setting up my own business. I didn't, no one in my family had ever set up a business. It wasn't something that was at all in my game plan. But in the end, it was something I just felt propelled to do because I could see really clearly a solution to a problem that I'd experienced myself. And I suppose the advice I would give to people in that situation is there are always going to be people telling you not to do it. It's a bad idea. It won't have legs. There's, I don't see where the revenue comes from, whatever it is. There's a million reasons not to. But I think if you've got that idea, and actually for me, it's given me huge flexibility. It's been incredibly hard work, but I have had the flexibility to do things that I've wanted to do outside of work as well. And I think it's a really powerful message. And, interestingly, in this year's Timewise Power List, we've also got a category of flexible founders for people to try and tell the stories of those so many people, many of them women but not all, who've been propelled to set up their own businesses, also because they want some flexibility and some autonomy about controlling how, when and where they work.
So, Karen, looking forward, what's the one thing you would still love to achieve?
The thing that I would love to achieve is I want to see that dial moved so that instead of only less than 1 in 10 jobs mentioning flexible or part-time working as an option, that it just becomes normal. So that, I didn't have a daughter, I've got 3 sons, but if they want to work flexibly in the future, that they just don't feel that they have to compromise on career progression in return for flexibility, that they don't feel that that's a trade-off that they've got to do, or if they get stuck. That I really do believe that you can have it all, but that the key to that is unlocking the flexible job market. So that's the thing that I'm not giving up on.
Thank you so much to Karen for taking time out from running a really, really big, important business and, of course, simultaneously putting on a wash. Because she can. And a reminder of the nominations for the Timewise Power 50 Awards. Do please get involved. All the details you need are at timewise.co.uk and nominations close on November the 3rd. Now, if there's a man or a woman that you'd love to hear on this podcast, just let us know. Tweet at NorthPowerWomen or email podcast@northernpowerwomen.com. Thank you. Can you believe? Time's almost up. But before episode 4 rides off into the sunset, it's time for Ask The Hive. Now, this is a chance for you to ask a question on something that you're interested in, maybe you're confused by or stuck with in your career. You ask, and then through the power of the brilliant minds associated with Northern Power Women, you get some answers. So in a moment, you'll hear next month's question from Fiona. But first, this month, Sarah got in touch and you responded.
Sarah Starling. I'm a self-employed voiceover. I've worked in the media for 25 years. I worked for the BBC for a very long time, across TV and radio, and I've been self-employed as a voiceover for 10 years. Recently, I joined a business forum on Facebook, and I asked this question of myself. My female colleagues regularly ask this of themselves, and we talk about it between ourselves. Why is it that we as women, successful women, don't feel confidence, question our skills constantly, whereas men don't seem to, or if they do, they keep it very quiet? How can we change that?
I think it's a feeling that is not particularly gender specific. And if I'm honest, I find a lot of it is to do maybe with this kind of 24-hour world that we live in. There's never a finish point to anything that you do. You know, there's always an email, a to-do list, a new project. So I think trying to find success in the smaller moments rather than seeing success as being like a finite place is like a better way to kind of frame those feelings.
Men do struggle with confidence issues, but they're probably more socially conditioned to cover that up with bravado, with bullshit, with just not being able to express those feelings. It's just not how men tend to be brought up to behave. In the line of work that you do, it seems that you are the product, and if people don't like what you do, then you can see that as a reflection on you personally. You're not part of a team who's going to submit a project. It's just you. And surely that's going to affect your confidence. And how do we change it? It's a societal problem, isn't it? It's something deep-rooted in how we bring up our boys and girls. There's no quick, easy fix to that, except just be honest and be open, and the more we talk about it, the more chance it has of going away.
So, ironically, I've actually come from a family of men. So, when I was young, I thought I was indestructible. I was the girl on the playground playing footy. I was the girl saying yes to absolutely everything. But then, when I went into an all-girls school, something happened. And something, by the time I was 12 or 13, I started to question myself, which is very, very interesting. So then that, for me, took me on a wayward path to get where I am now. I was told straight away, when I remember very, very, very vividly, when I was in year 9, very specifically, and I went in, I was really ballsy, went in and went, okay, so I want to, I'd love to be some type of entrepreneur, I'd love to explore something, into the computers, into IT, something like that. And I was told straight away, that's a man's role. Why is that a man's role? So you're telling me that I can do food technology and I can make an apple pie, I can make apple crumble, but I can't go in and learn to code. I can't learn the ins and outs of Excel, which was very big at the time. Why not? But I think that was really the catalyst for me then when I went into college and when I finally went to university after a wayward path to get where I was. That made me go, hang on a minute, there's something there, there's something about it, there's something about working class women being told that they can't do something. Why is that? And I think that has again a lot to do with the education that I had. It's, again, super working class. There was no opportunities, it was like get you in and out of the school system as quick as you can. If you get a higher education, it's fine. But really we just want you to get your 5 A to C's and then out the door type thing. But yeah, there's definitely something in education. Why is it just one national curriculum? Why aren't there different ways? And I think that really does impede particularly on women.
I personally think, working in a female-led industry, that if there were more men in the industry, I'd probably feel more confident. I've had situations at work where I clashed with certain personalities of the same gender as me, and I don't think if there were more men in the office necessarily that would have happened. I think I feel that men sort of bring a more sort of down-to-earth approach sometimes, and their ability to look at it from a different point of view, which tends to be, from my experience, less personal, can help really solve a situation quite quickly.
I think it's less acceptable in the workplace for a man to question his skills, and even more so to show that they're questioning their skills and their confidence, things like that. I've worked in a few different industries, and depending on what you're in and what kind of men or women are in that, I think that's a bigger factor of your confidence and abilities. But for me, I feel like in an office environment I can come forward a bit more.
So the question is, as women, and I'm not a woman, but I think that my perspective would be that men probably hide it as a default, and speaking as a man, I definitely feel unconfident, and I'm definitely asked a number of times how I managed to be so confident in certain situations, and I'm always the first to sort of reply, say, confidence is different to the way that you act. And I think there's also a lot of expectation that women will act in that way, and perhaps that it's a conformity to the status quo rather than anything else.
I don't have an answer to the question, but I do recognise it in myself, and I know that I know some of the most brilliant and inspirational women, and every single one of them suffers from the same sorts of problem. One thing I would say though is subliminally, women are encouraged to believe that it is hard. When people ask me, how do you do it all that messaging that it's actually difficult to be a successful woman, it's not. It's a damn sight easier to be successful. It's a damn sight easier if you're a high income earner and you can pay to outsource some of the crap jobs that people don't want to do. But we're constantly told it's going to be hard, and how do you do it?
Okay, so I haven't got the answer at all, but what I would say is running my own sort of company and charity, I had exactly that question on Monday. I literally wanted to go from CEO to probably the cook, and felt that's probably where I should be, better than where I am. And I think inherently women are competitive as well, and a lot, I know they all say the men, but I think they just think it's their God-given right to go up the ladder, so women get very competitive with each other as well, and it sort of then hinders your confidence. And I think as a younger woman that's doing quite well as well, you then start, it's that imposter thing that you think, oh no, I've taught my way here. Am I actually doing what I say I'm doing? And it's that self-belief that makes you question yourself. And it's everyone else asking you, every time I get any recognition for what I do, or what as a team we do, they go, well, you're 31. No, I was older was then. You're 31, you've got kids, how do you do it? I just get up every morning, go and do it, and it's a passion, and I deliver what my passion is.
Well, I think there is a number of reasons why women feel this way. I think the reality is that they shouldn't, but there's it starts off at a very young age in terms of all that messaging and all that modelling that goes on in relation to girls and boys, and what characteristics are attributed to young girls and boys, and that's where the rot starts to set in, and then it becomes kind of nearly an imposter syndrome, whereas you can actually do the job, or you can be very, very successful, but there's always that grain of doubt instilled. So I think there is something about education, but I also think there's also something about society in general in terms of recognising the language that we use around young girls, about women. We also about how and what we expect in terms of the aspirations for young women, and that carries on into adulthood. So that imposter syndrome is one of the major things that probably really does impede women's sort of sense of themselves and their sense of self-efficacy, as we would say, their self-belief. And that can have a rather corrosive effect in terms of how they conduct themselves and how they feel about their day-to-day work and their success. And I suppose the major distinction between that and their male colleagues is that I suppose boys and men hide it better. They're a little bit more, I suppose they have a guerrilla warfare tactic in relation to it. But inherently, I think what we really have here is we've got, it starts at childhood, it carries on into adulthood, but there are ways of addressing it, and clearly, you know, ripping up that imposter syndrome is possible. There are the whole thing around recognising that you do have some concerns about your self-confidence, getting a mentor, looking at other role models, seeing that it is possible, and actually really sort of mapping out and thinking about how fantastic at the beginning of every day saying, look what I'm going to do today, look what I did yesterday.
Thank you so much to everyone who took part this month. What a brilliant, meaty discussion. So, as ever, it's now over to you. If there's something you would like to ask the Hive, it's no good holding back. Instead, just send us a WhatsApp number to follow, or you can email podcast@northernpowerwomen.com and we will do the rest. This month's question comes from Fiona.
I'm Fiona Armstrong-Gibbs. In the new devolution deal, the Liverpool City region is made up entirely of men. There's no women to represent regions like St Helens, Halton and the Wirral. Should some of those male representatives step aside and allow a woman to take their seat?
Thank you, Fiona. Something tells me that question is going to touch a few nerves. So please don't hold back. Get in touch. It is so easy. You can record your answer using the voice memo app on your smartphone and email podcast@northernpowerwomen.com, or open up WhatsApp on your phone. Add the Northern Power Women podcast on 07928 387 712. And I'll give you that number again in a moment. And then you record your answer on WhatsApp using the little microphone icon. It's right next to the message box. Hold that down while you talk, take your finger off the button, and your message will immediately be sent to us. That number again, 07928 387 712. And all those details and the instructions you need are also online under podcast at northernpowerwomen.com. So there we have it. Thank you so much for listening, and also thanks for all your feedback. We are, of course, still but mere toddlers in the podcasting world, so we are so grateful for you for spreading the word amongst your friends, your colleagues, your networks, that person sat next to you on the bus, your friend from primary school, whoever it is. Thank you so much. Please do subscribe wherever you get your podcast from. And your feedback is so welcome as well. Do tell us what you love, what you'd like to hear, or we'll just agree with Karen Mattison.
So much better than women's are. I really enjoyed it. I think it was great.
The next episode arrives with you on November the 3rd. Until then, this is the Northern Power Women podcast. I'm Sam Walker, and this has been a What Goes On media production for Northern Power Women.